I'm going to kick off by exploring what we mean by data-intensive scientific research, and I'll use the example of COVID to explore some of the impacts of that research and some principles underlining public acceptability and participation in research. So, as this slide suggests, and I have to thank Cassie for this slide, there's a wealth of data that can be harnessed for research to inform both individual and population health. But accessing, integrating and interrogating those data is often challenging, especially if you want to generate robust findings that can be used across the population. So this session focuses on data-intensive scientific research, and I think that encompasses both technologies such as whole genome sequencing that utilizes large volumes of data, or less intensive data but for very large numbers of people, such as our Future Health, which has the ambition of recruiting 5 million people. And accessing accurate and representative data, as we found in the last session on AI, is a challenge, but it's key for generating science that has scientific validity and utility. And if that's going to be clinically useful and also not aggravate existing inequalities. And at the PhD Foundation, we focus on how better population health can be achieved through personalised interventions, such as risk stratification and early interventions of screening, diagnosis and treatment for those most at risk. And of course, realising those opportunities rely on data integration and analysis. And the Data Saves Lives campaign, which has been adopted by the NHS in the UK, recognises the value of accessing those health data in building better health. Now, why does scale and power of data matter? Well, 1 in 25 people are affected by a genetic disease, and increasingly technologies like whole genome sequencing is used in research to discriminate between disease-causing and non-disease-causing genetic variants. And that's complex because each of us has around 5 million variants that differ from the reference genome. And being able to integrate these multiple sources of data is vital, as I've said, for robust research. And AI approaches are increasingly being used for this research. So the power of research to impact prevention and care is really exemplified starkly by the COVID-19 pandemic, where control of patient information notices were issued under the Health Service Control of Patient Information Regulations. And they did several important things. One was mandate the GPs to share their primary care data for research, but also for NHS England, NHS Improvement and UK Biobank to share their data with NHS Digital for purposes relating to COVID-19. And Cassie will speak a little bit more about that in a bit. Moreover, the processes and the infrastructures for research were streamlined during the pandemic to catalyse regulatory approvals. And that meant that research could be carried out at unprecedented speed. And one of the exemplar research projects is the recovery trial. And this trial demonstrated that using dexamethasone, a cheap common drug, reduces mortality in people receiving ventilation or oxygen. And the findings from this trial were announced at 1 p.m. on the 16th of June, and by 5 p.m. the same day, this was adopted as NHS policy, and within days worldwide. So this trial, the results from this trial saved millions of lives during the pandemic. But of course, the use of data for research relies on continuing public acceptability, and this is fragile, as is demonstrated by the fallout caused by the GP Data for Planning and Research project. And this project was launched in May 2021 and planned to expand the use of encrypted and anonymised GP data from 55 million people in England for research beyond COVID-19 purposes, with those data being disseminated by NHS Digital. And as you may remember, it resulted in a massive public outcry, particularly about a lack of transparency about what was being proposed and the mechanisms for individuals to opt out of that policy, but also concerns about the involvement of commercial companies and fears that patient data would be used without consent for commercial gain. And at that time, this project was paused, but it's now up and running. And I think at the heart of this debate is the tension between upholding the rights of individuals to determine how data about them is processed, supported by associated principles of transparency and trustworthiness, and addressing about how these data might be used to amplify existing inequalities, versus the need for robust research which is accurate and representative, especially of those groups that may not be easily accessed, and research that's sufficiently powered. And the one-way mirror, which is quite old now, it's a report on the commercial access to health data that was prepared by Ipsos Mori and the Wellcome Trust, that recommended prioritising transparency and trustworthiness through structured information, but in particular clarity about why, who, what and how data will be used in that order, as well as respecting publicly held red lines. And this research, interestingly, highlighted that storage and regulation were taken completely for granted by the participants in this study.